In this video, we're going to be showing you our MLB optimizer and how to use it. The MLB optimizer is, without a doubt, the most detailed and best one that we offer because you can be very specific with how you want to build your lineups, which is really important in baseball where stacking is so key and batting order is so key and all that good stuff. So you want to have main set, choose your preferred site, select MLB. We're looking at Classic in this case, but we do also have these other formats if you want to use that. And we're going to look at today's main slate for opening day. First thing you're going to see here is the games filter. You can look through the games, see the implied run totals for each team, and as well as the game total for each game. This yellow question mark right here is indicating that the lineup has not been confirmed yet. We'll get a little bit into that later on here in the optimizer. But you can select and unselect teams. So, for example, this game has actually been postponed, so I don't want any players from that game, so I'm going to click it off. I just click the date down here. But you can also unselect specific teams. So if I were to play this slate and say maybe I don't want any Reds players, I can just click the Reds. You can see the Braves are still highlighted, so I'm still going to get some exposure to Atlanta. I'm going to go ahead and keep the Reds on for now. We'll turn that game off since it's postponed. The next section here is kind of your general settings, but there's a few additions here compared to some of our other optimizers that are really useful. So you have salary range, fantasy point range, salary cap. These are all sliders where you can limit. In baseball, salary cap isn't quite as important, so we might say, I want to spend at least 47 or something like that. I don't want to have any lineups that are just complete punt lineups. You can also manually type this here, 47,000. And then ownership cap, you can try and force yourself to have some lower owned players by setting this to a lower number, maybe 120 or 100. We'll leave it at 900 for now just to see what we're going to get optimally. And let's do 50 lineups for a nice round number. These sections over here, optimal mode is just going to give you those best projections every time. The highest fantasy point projected lineups every time that meet your criteria that you're going to fill in later. Tournament mode is going to try and spread out your ownership a little bit better. So let's say there's two pitchers you really, really like. Maybe you really like Bieber and Darvish on this slate. Well, if you tell your optimizer you want at least 20% of Bieber and Darvish, optimal mode might give you those two pitchers in the exact same lineups, and then you have 80% of your lineups with neither one of them, whereas tournament mode is going to try and spread that out a little bit more. Fantasy points and rating, that's not super important. And then unique players is just going to help you spread out your ownership a little bit more on your lineups. With just one unique player, you might have a really condensed player pool. As this number goes up, your player pool is going to get a little bit wider, your lineup's going to be a little bit more different. So it really just depends on your style of play for tournaments. This section here, if you don't check this box, you're not going to get hitters versus your pitchers in your lineup. But on maybe a small slate, like a 3-gamer, 4-gamer, something like that, you might want to have this box checked, and you can specify how many you're willing to have. It's not going to force them, it's just going to allow it to happen. On this slate, I don't think we need to get into that. 6 games, maybe. We'll say 0 to 1. We don't want to get too wild. You can also specify the batting order for your players. So maybe you don't want any guys from the back 3. Or you don't want 6, 7, 8. You're fine with the 9 wraparound. You don't want 6, 7, 8. You can specify that here. This section is for lineup confirmation. So I mentioned up here the yellow question mark. If you mark it to yes, you're only going to get confirmed players, which right now we don't have any. These are all unconfirmed lineups. But that'll kind of help you if you have to build your lineups 30 minutes before lock and you're not going to be able to come back and there's a lineup that's not confirmed yet and you don't want to have a player that's not going to end up playing, you can make sure you set that to yes. Keep it on all for now. This section is really nice. You can basically force your lineup to have a player from a certain position that's lower owned. So maybe on a specific slate, maybe there's 2 or 3 really chalky shortstops, and you want your lineup to be different at that one position. You're fine with getting chalky everywhere else because the chalk in other places are not as high, but you say, I want to force at least one shortstop that's under 10% owned. You can be, really specific here. This checkbox here just is going to adjust your min-max exposure to make sure that you get lineups done. So you might say that you want 10% Bobby Witt Jr., and it can't build you the amount of lineups that you want without going over that. So it gives you 11% Bobby Witt Jr., and it's going to still do that because it wants to prioritize completing those lineups. Randomization, this is baseball, baby. It's random sometimes. Homers, it's very binary, so maybe we could do 20, even 25% here. You want to have some randomization in those projections. This section I don't think is that important because, again, the optimizer is very quick. When it comes to stacking, you have 2 options. There is generalized stacking and there's specific stacking, and I'll show you both. Let's start with the generalized. We can choose what types of stacks we want to have in our batter lineups positions. That was a really bad sentence, but you know what I'm talking about. We don't typically want to choose this randomly select teams thing. We'll get into the teams in a second. Let's say that we want to have 50% of our lineups be a 3x3 stack and 50% be a 4x2 stack. Maybe we can even leave a little space for some weird lineups. Let's do 40 and 40. Then we have 20% of other things. Since I'm not specifying what those other things are, it'll just give me the 20% best lineups. This section here, stack 1, is going to be the left side here. So stack 1 is the 3 in this part and the 4 in this part. Stack 2 is the 3 in this part and the 2 in this part. So this left side is left, right is right, so on and so forth. I don't want to stack every single team on this slate. I'm not really interested in the Reds or D-backs, Pittsburgh. The rest I might have a little bit of exposure to. I'm a biased Royals fan, so I'm going to have some Royals on this one. I can also set mins and maxes on these. So, the Royals, I might say I don't want any more than 15%. I know that's a biased stack. I want at least 8%, but I don't want any more than 15. Mets are, one of the highest run totals on the slate. 4.8 might be the highest. Yeah, it looks like it is. 4.71. So I want to have a good amount of the Mets, maybe even 25%. And you can just kind of tweak these however you want to make sure you're getting exposure to the teams you want. You don't have to make these exactly 100%. Again, whatever percentages you don't fill in is just going to give you the optimal stacks otherwise. Now, secondary stacks, I'm probably going to look at the same teams. This doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but I want my secondary stacks to be the same general teams, and I'm just kind of crisscrossing the two. And again, you can adjust where you want these batting orders to come from. You might say primary stack, I really don't want these late batting order batters, but secondary stack, you don't mind as much because it's your smaller stack. It's really your own preference here. That's the generalized hitting stack rules. We can build some lineups with that, and then we'll come back up to the specific one. So let's go ahead and do that. We got to set some criteria for our positions, otherwise DraftKings isn't going to allow us to run it. So, whoops, I need to re-click here. So I'm Royals biased. I already mentioned that. So let me make sure I get some Bobby Witt Jr. and some Whit Merrifield. Those will be my 2 requirements that DraftKings mandates. And then I think we can go ahead and run this. 50 lineups, tournament mode. Yeah, I think we're okay. We click the optimize button. It's very, very quick. You can see it's loading here, and when it's done, we can scroll down. We can see all of our lineups. Over here on the right side are the lineups. On the left side are your exposures as well as projected ownerships, so you can compare. It's baseball. 80% of a batter is a lot, so I might say that's a little too much Juan Soto. So let's go to like 50%. Catcher is pretty random. I don't know that I want 50% of any catcher. So whoops. So we change this to 30%. And you can adjust your player pool over here. You might find a guy that you don't have enough of that you really, really like. Tyler O'Neill. I want a lot more than 12% Tyler O'Neill. So let's say 25% there on him. And you can adjust your pool here. Now this is the really cool thing about this particular optimizer. Right here it's going to automatically take you to players, but you can also switch to teams, and it shows you how much exposure you have to each team. Again, meeting those stat criteria that we had before. So I know that these Mets 58% exposure is either a 2-stack, a 3-stack, or a 4-stack. Same for each of these teams because I picked the same ones in those criteria. Then you can get even more specific. You can see how much you have of each stack. So I have 32% primary Met stacks, 16% secondary Met stacks, and so on and so forth for each team. So I'm getting a good amount of exposure to the Mets in those 3x3 and 4x2 stacks. And then lastly, and this is probably my favorite part, is you can see the exact combinations you have. So you might really like 2 teams on a slate, and you can see how much you have of each one. I am building a lot today with San Diego and Kansas City stacks because again I'm Royals biased. So it looks like I have only one lineup with San Diego, Kansas City. I'm trying to. It doesn't look like I have any with San Diego as the primary. Although actually this might not specify. I don't think it does specify. So that's just the different combos we have. But yeah, you can tweak this here. So if you have too much of something, you can turn it down. If you don't have enough, you have to come back up here to your tool and force a little bit more. So I might say that I want to have 10% Kansas City, and I want to make sure I have 10% San Diego, or I need to have 10% Kansas City secondary stacks, and then I can re-optimize, and that number might increase a little bit. You can also just manually increase either the projection or the ownership for the individual players on those teams. So now I've changed this again, and now I have a lot more. I have 10% Kansas City, San Diego builds. So you can adjust those however you would like. And then again, you can look at your individual lineups over here to make sure they're meeting the necessary criteria that you were hoping for. Coming back up here to the specific rules here for hitter stacks. You can only have one of these on at a time. So you can either have the general one, which is like more team driven, or you can have the specific one. The specific one is a lot more complex. This is really only for people who have used optimizers a lot. You can say that I want to have 3-man stacks for Kansas City. Whoops. Oh, okay, good. I got it. I want 10% 3-man stacks for Kansas City. I want Bobby Witt Jr. I want Whit Merrifield, and I want Salvi. And I want to have at least 10% of my stacks with that. And then I can go to the next team I'm interested in stacking. Maybe the Cardinals. It's taking a while to load here. Okay, it's just condensed a little bit because of the X over here. And I want to have 10% of them. And I might want Carlson, Goldie, and Tyler O'Neill. You can also select double stacking so that it's going to pair these things together. So my secondary stacks I want to be a little bit smaller. I can pick another team that I'm interested in stacking. I want 5% of San Diego. I want to have Cronenworth, and I want to have Machado. That's my 2-man stack from them. So this is just a way of getting much more specific relative to this one. And again, you can only do one of those things. You can't use both. Once you've got the lineups you like, you can click this green download button, That'll give you your export, and you can upload that onto FanDuel or DraftKings, depending on which site you're playing on. But you can see this MLB tool is crazy detailed and really, really useful. I think if you're playing 10 or more lineups in MLB, you need to be using this tool. If you're playing, 100, 150, it's absolutely essential, because if you're just randomizing things or you're just picking lineups with the best projections, you don't have an advantage. Stacking is so important in baseball. Correlation is so important in baseball. That using some of these features like the stacking stuff, choosing where you pick your batting order from, making sure you have hitters that are not facing your pitchers, these sorts of things are really, really important when producing MLB lineups.